Hey, this is Chris, and this is this week's Bible 101. Last week we talked about the Garden of Eden, the fall of humanity, and how things became broken. Yet God had a plan to bless and rescue the world through the family of this guy named Abram, who later became known as Abraham. And tonight we are talking about the Exodus, about how Abraham's descendants became this great nation that needed to be rescued by God from slavery in Egypt. Now, how did we get from Abram to a whole entire nation of people enslaved in Egypt? I would actually love to share that story because it is a story of intrigue and romance and deception and sibling rivalry and deception and sibling rivalry and lots of sibling rivalry and political machinations and all of this. It's an incredible story, but I'll just give you the bare bones details. Abraham and Sarah, in their extreme old age, gave birth to a son named Isaac. Isaac married a woman named Rebekah, and they had sons named Esau and Jacob. Jacob grew up and got married to two women, actually, and that caused a lot of complications. But they had lots of sons. One of those sons was named Joseph. And Joseph was Jacob's favorite son. He loved him so much. He lavished praise and gifts and attention on him to the point that his other brothers were incredibly jealous of Joseph, to the point where they decided, let's kill him. And then someone's like, no, let's not kill him. Let's just sell him to slavery. And they're like, good idea. We'll just do that. And so Joseph got sold into slavery in Egypt. And while Joseph was in Egypt, his story went, taking him from being a slave to a prisoner to being the second most powerful person in all the land, as he basically helped hatch a plan that rescued the whole entire country from famine. Jacob's family and all of Joseph's brothers moved to Egypt. Through various shenanigans, they all reconciled, and they decided to settle there in Egypt. And the family grew and grew into this great nation. Fast forward many years later, and there's a Pharaoh who doesn't know about Joseph, doesn't know about what Joseph did to save Egypt from famine. And he looks at the Israelite people, which is what they're called now, and he feels threatened. And so what he decides to do is that he is going to subjugate and enslave all of these people. They're going to force them to work and build their cities and make their buildings, and basically dehumanize them in a lot of different ways. And this happens for many years. And yet the people of Israel continue to grow. They continue to grow in number. And the Pharaoh is threatened by that. And so he decides that there's going to be a law that every single baby boy born to an Israelite woman has to be killed. And this is where we get to the story of a boy named Moses. And Moses' mom, when she gives birth to him, tries to rescue his life. She makes a basket. She puts the baby in the basket and sends Moses up the Nile River, where he's discovered by Pharaoh's daughter, who decides to adopt the baby and raise him as a prince in the Egyptian court. Moses grows up and eventually learns that he is the child of slaves. He's not royalty as he thought. And one day he sees an Egyptian slave driver abusing and beating an Israelite. And so Moses tries to rescue the guy, and he kills the Egyptian slave driver. And then he has to flee Egypt because he's a fugitive wanted for murder. And so he ends up in a place called Midian, and he becomes a shepherd. And one day Moses is with his sheep out on a mountain called Horeb. And he sees a bush, and it looks like it's on fire, but it's not burning up. It's consumed with fire, but it's not wilting away. And from that, he hears the voice of God. And God tells Moses that he has heard the cries of his people in Egypt. And he wants Moses to go and free those people, the people of God that are enslaved in Egypt. And this is one of the things I want us to sit with this week, is this idea that God heard the cries of God's people. And God hears the cries that you and I have when we're struggling, when we're going through life and it is difficult or hard. God hears us and cares about us and wants us to know that we are not alone, that God is with us. One of Moses' first responses was like, how can I go to Pharaoh, who's like the most powerful political leader in the world at that time probably? How am I supposed to go to Pharaoh? And God says, I am with you. I will go with you. And as we go through our life, as we go through all the things that we face and all our difficulties, you and I are not alone. God is with us. God cares about us. Um, Now, Moses is scared, very honestly scared, and with good reason. And so he begins to ask a lot of questions. He begins to say, "Well, who am I to say sent me? Like, what's your name?" And God says something that in the Hebrew it can translate several ways. God says that God's name is "I am who I am," or "I will be who I will be." I had a professor in college who said that one way that it could be translated is "I am the one who causes it be." God is this one, this being who is and always will be and is unchanging, but is always there for us. I am sent me. The one who causes to be, the one who gives us life and breath, is the one who sent me. Um, and, Moses says, "Well, what if they don't believe me?" And God says, "There will be signs." And Moses says, "Well, I can't seek." And God says, "I gave you your mouth. You can do whatever I know. But even if you don't feel safe, I'll send your brother Aaron with you to help you speak." And so you see in Moses go through this thing that you and I think often go through where like God tells us, this is what I need you to do. This is the thing to do that is right. This is the thing that's going to bring goodness and justice and love to the world. We're like, I don't know if I can do it. And God's like, I have created you. I know exactly what you're capable of. I am with you and you can do this. So Moses goes to Egypt and he goes to Pharaoh, this incredibly powerful man, and he says, "Let my people go. My God requires that the Israelites be freed from slavery." And Pharaoh's like, "Ha! No." And so this is where we see 10 plagues come upon Egypt as Pharaoh continues to stubbornly try to hold on to power and continue to oppress the Israelite people. And those 10 plagues are all the water turns to blood, um, frogs, gnats, flies, all the livestock dying, everyone getting boils, hailstorm, locusts, darkness, and then the angel of death killing the firstborn of all families in Egypt. And throughout this whole thing, you see the arrogance of Pharaoh. Like he feels like he is powerful. He feels like because he has power, that he is the one that the gods favor. And how on earth could a god care about these, piddly Israelite people? But eventually, after the angel of death comes, which is where the Israelite people, where they celebrate Passover, they celebrate how God, the angel of death, passed over their houses and spared the lives of their children. The Pharaoh says, "You can go. Leave this place." And so the Israelite people, after many years of being in slavery, they're freed. They're going to get to go to their own land and be their own people. They're going to get to be in a place where they're considered to be human again, where they're not forced to work for somebody else in enslavement. But then the Pharaoh changes his mind, and he sends out his army to chase them down in the wilderness, to either bring them back or to slaughter them all. And the Israelite people find themselves at the edge of the sea. We often say it's the Red Sea. There's a translation that says it actually might be the Sea of Reeds, but either way, they are stuck with water on one side that they can't cross and an angry army on the other side. And they come to Moses and say, "Have you just let us out in the wilderness to die?" And Moses cries out to God and asks for God to make a way for them. And so God says, "Raise your staff," and the sea parts. And if you've ever seen the movie The Prince of Egypt, that scene, you should just see it just for the scene where they cross the Red Sea, because it's an amazing and like jaw-dropping look at what it may have been like for such an incredible thing to happen. And the people of Israel, where it seemed like there was no way at all, God made a way, and they cross across the sea on dry land. And they get to the other side, and as they get there, the Egyptian army chases them down, and the waters, once the Israelites people are free, the waters fall. And falls on the Egyptian army, and the people of Israel are free. And they sing this incredible song to God. They realize that, oh, we have a God who hears us. We have a God who is with us, and a God who cares about the poor and the powerless and the oppressed. And that is the God that's still with us today, a God that hears us and a God that's with us, and a God that cares about the poor and the powerless. And so that is what we're going to talk about this week. That is really what we're going to be talking about forever and ever.